recording. It's 6:02. So I'm going to make sure that we begin 2 minutes after 6 each time. I don't want to delay the start of the session because I want to make sure that we're able to cover all the topics that we need to cover and do what needs to be done. And that also just reminds everyone that it's a good thing to turn up at the correct time. So let me begin by welcoming everyone to LAWS11065. And as you would know, constitutional law is one of the pre-11 subjects, and therefore is a required subject for all would-be lawyers in Australia. And it is a fascinating subject, primarily because it gives you a sense about the powers of the federal government as opposed to the state government, and the tension between the two in trying to determine who has the power to legislate in relation to what. And that can come in the form of income taxes. That can be in relation, for example, to questions about crimes and so on. So these are topics that we will be delving deeper into as we proceed in the course. And as well, you would have a better idea by taking up constitutional law about the tension that exists among the three branches of government, which is the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And so it's important because obviously, as we all know, we always hear stories about what the parliament does, and we look at decisions of the High Court oftentimes, and they come out in the news. And it is important for us, especially if, for you to become lawyers as well at some point, it is important for you, therefore, to understand the powers of the three branches of government, as well as the powers of the state and the federal government. And then we will also examine questions about rights and freedoms of citizens, and then be able to become familiar with with some of the key constitutional law principles, such as representative government or responsible government or constitutionalism. So it is I can assure you that, if you put your mind and heart into the subject, you will appreciate the value and the importance of this course. And if you've started reading the textbook by Ratnapala and Crow, that would be correct, right? Yep, it's both of them. And if you've started listening to the lecture podcasts, you would have gotten a better sense of what constitutional law is all about. So having said that, perhaps you've already gotten to know me a bit by what I posted about myself in Moodle. So I'm not going to delve into that any further. And instead, what I'm going to do is to be able to go through the key outcomes in tonight's session. And before I do that, though, again, as I said, I want to greet everyone a warm welcome to constitutional law. And I will then be able to tell you how I expect to run the tutorial as well as our unit. So I've been teaching constitutional law for the past 3 years now. Yeah, over 3 years since I joined CQ Uni in 2013. Okay, so after tonight's session, you should be able to explain the purpose of the tutorials and how they will be run. So I'm going to speak more about what the tutorials are going to be about. And you will also get to know more about some of your classmates because we will have a quick meet and greet session. I find that important because you need to form groups, and I understand that there are some of you who haven't really been able to form groups yet. So we're going to devote a few minutes just for the quick meet and greet session. In other words, at some point, I'm going to break up the class into smaller groups, and I hope Zoom will allow me to do that because I know that there's a function for it. And I hope that specific function will in fact work tonight. So we're going to have that because, again, that gives you an opportunity to just get to know other classmates better, and perhaps will allow you to have a better decision as to who you would like to be part of a specific team. Because as far as the midterm assessment is concerned, there is a group component to it, and you probably want to be able to join a group where you know the other group members. It doesn't mean that you can't have a functioning group even if you're all strangers, because initially you will be, but obviously if you start interacting with the others, then the other persons won't be strangers anymore. So we're going to have a quick meet and greet session, and then we're going to try to talk about the key assessments, and that particular session of tonight's tutorial will be devoted to allowing you to ask questions about the assessments. And then finally, we will delve on the topics which are in the discussion questions as posted in Moodle. In the event that we will not be able to cover all the 4 discussion questions, we could probably take it up again when we have the drop-in session on Monday, which is from 6 to 6:30. Or otherwise, I will actually be posting the answers, the suggested answers to the discussion questions. Okay, so having said that, I'd like to point out that for some of you who might not be familiar with Zoom yet, I've actually muted everyone. And in the event you wish to say something, just unmute yourself. So there's an option there where you can unmute yourself, or perhaps you can raise your hand, and hopefully I will be able to see you raising your hand. I think there's a function there again that allows you to do that. So before I continue, would there be anyone who'd like to say something? None? Okay, so let me begin by talking about my teaching philosophy, which relates to the way that the tutorials will be ran. So first of all, I'd like, so let me just mute everyone again. Okay, so have I muted myself as well? No? Okay, so the first thing I'd like to point out is that as far as the tutorial sessions go, I tend to challenge students by asking questions. So it's what is known oftentimes as the Socratic method. So I will be probing you to, be able to expound on your answers. Now, for some of you, it may appear like it's disconcerting, it might make you uncomfortable, but look at it as a way of getting accustomed to what it actually is like to be acting as a lawyer, especially if you appear in court, because you will need to be able to learn to stand on your feet and be able to answer questions propounded by the judge. And especially if you go to trial, you do need to be very accustomed to that practice of just being able to respond to questions and be able to express your own thoughts, even in an atmosphere where people are watching, in an atmosphere which might be tense for some of you. Are there chats going on? Hang on. Now, the problem, though, with Zoom is that, yeah, there are chats going on. Okay. So let me point out something as well, and this is going to be part of how the tutorials are ran. The problem really, as a guy, and I don't know if it's probably different for women, is that men tend to be, how do you call that, monofocus, single focus. So if I'm talking, it's extremely difficult for me to be looking at the chat as well, the chat box. So I just can't do it. So I think women are quite good at multitasking, but perhaps not for men, and especially not in my case. So that there is a chat going on the screen, and it's difficult for me to be talking to you and then looking at that. So if you need to say something, and you want to be able to say to the rest of the class, and you want to be able to grab the attention straight away, you need to make sure that you pick up the mic and just say something. Feel free to interrupt me anytime. And then when I get the chance, if somebody else is talking, I'll have a look at the chat that's going on. So that's the first one. I tend to challenge students. And as I said, it's a way of preparing you for what it is actually like to be a lawyer. Now, secondly, I want to emphasize, though, that even if that might be my approach, which is to kind of challenge you and ask you probing questions, it is never intended to embarrass you. Okay, so let's be clear about that. I will never try to embarrass you. In fact, I will never judge you. And even assuming that somebody provides an answer which to that person is a mistake, I will not be very direct to say that you're wrong and so on, because what we need to understand is that the tutorial is actually an opportunity for learning. And as we know, learning means you make mistakes. And if you recall the days when you were young, and they say Leonie has a baby there. Babies initially, the only way they learn to walk, for example, is by falling. And that's just a way of making a mistake. And that's the way they learn. Same thing with talking, they make mistakes. So look at the tutorial session as an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to make mistakes. And I will never judge you. But because you make mistakes, oftentimes mistakes are actually very important teachable moments, because these are moments when you remember what went wrong and they probably stick with you, as opposed to, you come up with the correct answer and then you pat yourself and said, oh, I'm so intelligent and so brilliant, and then you probably forget. But if you make a mistake, chances are, the lessons that you learn, both in terms of the experience as well as the knowledge that you gain, will likely stay with you longer. So that's the second thing. Now, the third, so I've already mentioned about the nature of the tutorials where I kind of challenge people. Secondly, I will never seek to embarrass you. And thirdly, I do realize that if you want to be successful, or if anyone wants to be successful, it does require effort and hard work. I speak about this in the context of the other notion, which is the growth mindset. And this comes from the work of Carol Dweck, where oftentimes, in society, we tend to judge people and the success of people on the basis of what we think would be intelligence and raw talent. But in fact, according to her studies, a lot of successful people actually attribute their success to the efforts that they put in. And the danger really with thinking that one is successful or is doing well on the basis of talent, on the basis of intelligence, is that it is what is known as the fixed mindset. And the problem with the fixed mindset, according to her research, and a lot of other researchers researching in that field, is that people with fixed mindset feel pretty bad about making mistakes. And oftentimes they don't want to put themselves out there where they could potentially make mistakes, because every time that they make a mistake, so these are for people with a fixed mindset, every time that somebody with a fixed mindset makes a mistake, it somehow brings into question the intelligence and the talent that person has. And because some of these people with a fixed mindset want to be able to hold on to that idea, then they'd rather not make mistakes. On the other hand, people with the growth mindset are not scared about making mistakes. And in fact, to them, making mistakes is actually an opportunity to learn. And therefore, I hope that as we move on, especially in the course of the tutorials, especially when you have assessments, and in the process, I provide feedback, and the feedback might tell you that what you stated is actually incorrect. Look at these feedbacks as opportunities really to learn. And a good example I would like to give you is, just yesterday, I was able to finish the submission of a revised manuscript for the Journal of International Entrepreneurship, which is an A-star journal, a quartile 1 journal. I've already had a paper published in the journal a year ago. So I submitted another journal and they accepted it subject to revisions. If you look at the feedback and the comments from the reviewers, it's like, I have got to be so dumb, that these people are saying these things about my paper. But in fact, for those of us who are quite active in publishing and writing papers, every time we get comments from reviewers, those comments are always negative, because that is the purpose of the reviewers. They point out to you your weaknesses and your deficiencies in the way you write, in your thoughts, and so on. So you can't take it personally. And I would suggest that you may want to consider doing the same. So that if I were to point out some errors or what I perceive to be mistakes, it's never anything personal about you. It's never about you. It's really just, guiding you to learn, because of, and I think that is often the struggle for those who might have children, where we wonder, should I keep on telling my child that my child is brilliant, that my child has so much talent? And the danger there is that your kids grow up thinking that, they can't make mistakes. And then they have difficulty dealing, therefore, with disappointments and frustrations later on. And so part of the growth mindset really suggests that if you want to succeed, it's really all about effort and hard work. And I say these things in the context of knowing that becoming a lawyer. Somebody want to say something?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
What's the name of the author of that book again, please?
Yep, that's Carol Dweck. I'm going to put it in the chat box.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yep, no worries. So that's, and really it's a very transformational book as far as I'm concerned. So the title of the book is, hang on, Mindset, I think, yeah. So it's about the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. Have a look at it because it is a fantastic book based on a lot of research. And it helps you even in terms of dealing, not just about yourself, but dealing with family members, dealing with workplace environments, and more importantly, it talks about relationships as well, even love. You can have a fixed mindset where, if your partner or your boyfriend or your girlfriend does a mistake, then you say, my boyfriend or my girlfriend is a jerk. This is a loser, is a bad person. That is a fixed mindset because you look at it on the basis of attributes, qualities, and traits. And in that case, therefore, if you judge your partner on the basis of traits, then because traits are meant to be permanent, you've actually just labeled somebody, and therefore you'd think that they're incapable of changing. But on the other hand, if you adopt the growth mindset, then you look at the behavior, and because you're looking at the behavior, then you understand that people can change. Have a look because it's a fantastic book by Carol Dweck. So, okay, before I continue, I tend to enjoy talking sometimes. I get too excited. So I'll stop myself for a while. Does anyone want to say something before I continue?
Yeah, Mango, and just to add a little bit, that what you're basically saying is that criticism will be constructive rather than destructive.
Absolutely.
And so from that, you can learn, and you mustn't take things too much to heart.
Yes.
And, we're all going to get things wrong. And that, as you say, that is the way to learn.
Yes, absolutely, John. Absolutely. And so even, as far as I'm concerned, I don't mind making mistakes because it is an opportunity to learn. So I will never attempt to be destructive or very personal in my criticism. Somebody found it. Okay. Is that the book? Very good. Okay, thank you so much, John. Okay, so having said that, if you don't mind, I would like us to spend about 10 minutes just for a meet and greet in smaller groups. So this is difficult to do a meet and greet with 67 participants right now. Now, if it will allow me, let me see if I could break you up into breakout rooms. Okay, so I'm gonna assign you to, how many rooms? Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna assign you to rooms of 6 participants each. So that means, you get to talk to each other. Now, and then I'll call you back at about 6:30 or a little more than that. What I'd like you to do, because as we said, we have a group component in the assessments, try to say something about yourself, whatever you would like to say. So who you are, where you live, especially about where you live, where you might be in your law degree. You may want to talk about your family, your friends, whatever. You may also want to talk about your motivations for taking up law and why you want to be a lawyer. So is that all right? And then I'll call you back in. Okay? So I'm going to break you up now in a few seconds. Before I do that, does anybody want to say something? Nope? Okay, so I'm going to break you up now. You're suddenly going to go into breakout rooms of 5 to 6 participants, and then I'll call you all back in about 10 or so minutes. Okay? So I'll catch you shortly. Are you there? Are you now in breakout rooms? Okay. Okay. Cindy, are you in a breakout room? No? What's going on? Open all rooms. Hang on.
Come here. Come here. Domestico, come here.
Yep. So that's the thing. I haven't done it so much. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. That's standing up. I don't have a problem going to Nick from you. Not like, no, what about you take guys too? They need to be put a little bit, but I'm pretty happy with that. And there's a possibility of government like that. And then actually, I know one of the highest score for the month. It's not made to be really high. It's just not really to work out that I fucking watch one shit like fucking job. So, yeah. Yeah, the whole thing is that if I go, I'm like, yeah, every other job, like every job at next one is because of me. Every other job, like you want to be brought in as one, that's because of me. Like, anyway, that's. And the only other concern I have is, you know, how I really quickly my head, but I just kept remember, and that's quite bad because, I mean, a lead, anyway, have a look at it, I'll let you spend time family, that's why I was just confused about the dollars, that makes sense, you know. Yep. Not cool. Hey, man. Hopefully it's better soon. Yep, cool. Hey, man.
I'm just waiting for the breakout rooms to close. Should happen in a few seconds now.
Manjo, I've just got a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Just in regards to direct feedback from you, is it best that we post it to Moodle and get the feedback from there, or is it best to just directly email you?
It'll be best to do it in Moodle, because in that case, you know, it allows. Hang on, I'm just going to mute everyone, and then just unmute yourself, Anthony. Okay, so I just had to mute everyone. If you need to say something, just unmute yourself. Okay, so going back to the question of Anthony, if you have any, you know, like you have an answer, you want to provide a comment to any of the discussion questions, the kind of feedback I would want to do is something that would be read by everyone else. So I will be providing feedback or answers to discussion questions in Moodle. I would advise against doing it to me by email, because then only you will benefit. And it's difficult to be doing that because there are more than 260 students right now enrolled in constitutional law. So imagine if all of you start sending me questions, and then I'll be repeating the same providing the same answer. So if you have any questions about the course, especially about the substantive topics, please post them in Moodle. That's where I will provide my answer. Okay. Now, so as I said, if you want to say something, you need to unmute yourself. So moving on, because we need to, yes. Yes.
Sorry, can I ask a question? In regards to that feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll probably touch on this when you discuss the assessments, but the feedback that you provide for the discussion questions, are they in a similar line and structure to what you provide for the actual assessments?
No.
Are you, no? Okay, how do you structure your assessment feedback?
Okay, so as far as there are two parts to your question. One is in relation to the Moodle discussion answers. The other one is the assessment feedback. There are two parts. As far as the assessment feedback is concerned, especially, for example, as far as the midterm assessment is concerned, first of all, I'd like to point out, when I provide feedback, I will attempt to point to the positive aspects of the answer. But then I need to provide, in a very detailed manner, what I perceive to be the weaknesses of the midterm assessment. And those weaknesses might be in terms of the way that the issues were identified. So if the issues were misidentified, I'd probably point it out. If there was a failure to properly cite the law, or to a failure to properly explain what the law is, I will also be pointing it out. And obviously, as far as the application is concerned, I will also be pointing out any weaknesses in terms of the way that the law is applied to the case fact. So in other words, as far as the midterm assessment is concerned, my feedback is likely going to be more detailed. And I will provide detailed feedback to each student's assessment. I will only provide one single feedback, obviously, to the group assessment or the midterm assessment, but I will be providing detailed individual feedback to each midterm assessment. Now, in relation, however, to the discussion question answers, it is unlikely for me to be able to give feedback to each answer because there are just too many, and I won't have the time to do that. My feedback, though, will come in two ways. One is I'll be providing a suggested set of answers, which I've already mentioned. But secondly, every now and then, I'll jump into the discussion to point out, what I perceive to be the good things and the bad things of the answer. So as far as the discussion questions answers are concerned, I will be unable to provide feedback to each of the answers there. I can't. There are just too many answers. So I'm gonna pick and choose. Perhaps sometimes I'll provide the feedback in Moodle itself. Sometimes I'll provide the feedback in the course of the tutorial. Okay. So having said that, we could probably move on to the next topic of tonight's session, and that is about the assessments. Would any of you happen to have any other questions concerning the assessments? Concerning, for example, the formation of groups, as indicated in my email, I will be providing the guidelines on the formation of groups, I think, by tomorrow. And I will release the midterm assessment questions on Monday. So you have about a month to work on the midterm assessments. Okay, any questions? Let me just say something there. It is possible that some of you may end up having a final, you may end up having to submit another assessment piece that may have the same deadline as the one for the final assessment for constitutional law. If it happens that it's just going to be one other assessment where there is a conflict as far as the deadlines are concerned, I am unlikely to provide an extension. Because as far as the final individual take-home paper is concerned, I deliberately allowed 48 hours for you to answer the assessment, when in fact, you could answer the assessment within 3 hours. So I've given a leeway of 48 hours. So treat it as if, like, if you were to take an invigilated exam, you will only be given 3 hours. So I will design the final take-home paper as if it were an invigilated exam, except that it gives you the luxury of doing this at your in your house or anywhere, and you have access to all the resources that you need. So the final take-home paper is designed to be finished within 3 hours. And because you've been given 48 hours, even if it happens that there is another assessment that is due within that time frame as well, that shouldn't have to make it difficult for you to complete our assessment or the other assessment. Any other questions?
Manjo, just with the structure of the assessments and the final take-home paper,
Yes.
will they be run similar to other courses? For example, the assessment covers week 1 to 5, and the final take-home final take-home paper is 6 to 11. Will you be structuring it in that way, or will the final take-home paper cover all the material?
Okay. The midterm assessment will only cover topics 1 to 5. I will try to structure it in such a way that the topics to be covered for the final assessment will only cover weeks 6 to 11. But note, as I said, that as far as weeks 1 to 5 are concerned, there are certain themes in constitutional law that will recur in subsequent weeks. So, for example, if you talk about constitutionalism, it is possible, or the rule of law, especially in relation to questions about rights and freedoms of citizens, these are actually covered in week 1 as well. So you might think, therefore, that because it was covered in week 1, it won't be taken up in week 11, or in the final exam, or in the final assessment. So let me repeat. The topics that will be covered in the final assessment are likely going to be from week 6 to 11. But there will be some subtopics there which will also have been covered in previous weeks. But that's because there are underlying themes which run through all the weeks that are being covered in constitutional law. Does that make sense? Okay, but that is still to say that I will be focusing on week 6 to 11 topics, but there will be some topics that would have been covered earlier. Okay, other questions that you might have?
Manjo, for the group component for the second assessment, is it just, because I read somewhere that there's going to be 4 questions, 2 we do on our own, the other 2 we do as groups. But in the course outline, it has the word presentation. So do we have to record anything, or we just write it as a group?
You just write it as a group. So there won't be any oral presentation. It's still a presentation, except that it's in writing. It's in that sense that there is that written presentation, but there won't be any oral presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? None? Okay, so we've covered already so far how the tutorials will be ran and what my teaching philosophy is all about, and how I tend to view learning as a process. We've also covered the assessments. We've also broken up. So we've covered the first 3 things as far as this session is concerned. So we're going to devote the next 20 minutes to discussing the 4 problem questions. What I would typically do in future tutorials would be to break you up into smaller groups, just to enable you, provide you an opportunity to be able to discuss it in better detail, because this is such a huge group. But for now, because we've already broken up ourselves into groups earlier, I'm just going to run this as an entire class. So, first discussion question, and you can answer this question either by picking up the microphone. So just tell me if you want to say something, and I'll give you the floor, or you can provide your answer in the chat box. So question 1. Explain why some nations have written constitutions but do not have constitutionalism, while others have constitutionalism but no written constitutions. Which is of greater importance in a democratic society, a written constitution or constitutionalism?
I'll have a crack.
Very good. Angelina, is that it?
Why not? This is just my thoughts on it. I'm still trying to get my head around all of this, but for me, I would think that constitutionalism is more important than a written constitution, because it's all good to have something on paper, but if you don't have the parliamentary support and that separation of powers amongst Parliament, then there's nothing really to enforce that written constitution in the first place.
Thank you. I'm going to give my comment in a short while. You're actually correct, Angelina. Would anyone else want to offer his or her own answer? And preferably,
I'd like to.
Preferably, if you could try to tell us what constitutionalism is in the first place, just so we have a better sense of what we're talking about here. Who was it who wanted to volunteer?
I'll have a go if that's. Oh, unless you want to go, David.
I just wanted to make just a little comment about the last part about constitutionalism instead of written constitution, in that constitutionalism sort of suits more of the fact that a written constitution is fairly rigid in its form, and if it's the same constitution that's been around for 100 years and generally values change within 100 years, constitutionalism can sort of move within the state of constant flux within community and within the nation of itself. So a written constitution can be too rigid to the point that it could actually get to the point of being undemocratic in itself.
I've got a bit of an ulterior idea on that one.
Sorry, who was that? Can I just give the floor to Tamara and then Jason, I go to you, if that's all right? Tamara, yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, I agree that it's constitutionalism over a written constitution as well, because a written constitution is, I suppose, if you like, it's a guide, you know, it's a sort of like hold my hand sort of thing. Whereas if you, and sort of it would seem that whether, I'm just going to read from the answer that I've got, which is on Moodle as well, as it would seem that written or not, it requires the respect and obedience of both officials and citizens and a supporting political culture. Such a culture depends in part on favourable historical, social and economical conditions. And all this is a part of the characteristic of a constitution, which is maintaining the integrity of which is crucial to its stability. So whether it's written or not, I think it's on the people, it's on the government to abide by it, basically, and whether it actually means anything.
Thank you, Tamara. Jason.
Yeah, I just want to add the bit, Constitution forces people to do the right thing, so to speak, but constitutionalism, people want to do the right thing because that's the way they are. And I think if you had a group of people living together in society or in a country that are wanting to do the right thing for the country and everyone works as a team, that's far better, because people are obviously trying to do the right thing because they want to, not because they have to, which is that's my opinion.
Very good. Can I say something? Because there were four people talking and I'm going to be unable to remember what you guys said. So the first one, was it Angelina who said it? You know, if you talk about the Constitution, at the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper, which can be true, because and I see Jay here talking of, no, was it Gordon, who said that there is in Cambodia you have a constitution, but it is rarely applied. So at the end of the day, you can have a constitution, a written constitution, which sets out the relative powers of each organ of government, but actually no one is obeying it. And oftentimes the constitution can actually become the instrument for despotism, for dictatorship. It becomes a tool for somebody to hold despotic powers, autocratic powers, in order, for example, to subjugate certain people. So for example, if you remember South Africa, it was probably the case that apartheid, which was the national policy of racial segregation, was actually rooted in the constitution, in a written constitution. So in other words, you can have a written constitution that becomes the instrument for racial discrimination. That can become an instrument to enable a dictatorship. Now, having said that, what exactly is constitutionalism? Constitutionalism is founded on the principle and the idea that there is a rule of law. And when you speak of a rule of law, or the principle of legality, for example, it tells you that people must function according to what the law says, that no one is above the law, that the law applies equally to everyone, and that there are checks and balances. So in other words, constitutionalism is an overarching principle that presupposes that the powers should not be concentrated in the hands of a single person or a single organ of the state, and that everyone must abide by the rule of law. That the law is superior to the dictate or the caprice of a single or whims of a single individual. And that is why it is often important that it is why constitutionalism is oftentimes more important than a written constitution, where in some undemocratic societies actually, they have a written constitution, but they actually have an undemocratic society where the rights and freedoms of people are actually suppressed, or people are repressed.
Hi, Manjo.
Yes. Hang on. I'm just gonna mute everyone again because I think I'm picking up some signals. And then if you want to say something like for us, unmute yourself. You can go ahead for us. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, Manjo. Just reiterating on that, I'd like to give an example from our Pacific neighbors from Fiji. I'm from Fiji.
Okay.
And they had a coup in 1988. Then they brought in a military government, and they drafted a 1992 constitution, which actually stated that the head of the state or the prime minister of the country should be a native Fijian, whereas the population of the country was divided exactly 50% Fijian and 50% Indian. The reason they had the coup because at that time the majority of the government voted for an Indian prime minister.
Oh.
So they went ahead and made a constitution which guaranteed a Fijian head of state at all times. But in saying that, the country moved on and the values of the people changed. And then they brought in another constitution, the 1997, which pretty much guaranteed a democratically elected head of state, whoever it might be, a Fijian or an Indian. But as you can see, they had another coup in 2000. And then again, the Indian head of government was deposed, and they had a military government. And recently they had another election. And this time they had the person who actually contested the election was a military commander. So the separation of powers was very blurred.
I see.
He was still held the commander-in-chief, like he was the head of the military, and he became the head of the government as well.
Okay.
So that's just an example I picked up from what you said.
Thank you for us. That's a perfect example, which does bring us home to the point about the importance of constitutionalism over a written constitution, which can in fact become the instrument, as you say, of perpetuating certain people in power and disenfranchising certain individuals like Indians in Fiji at that time. Thank you for that. Thanks for sharing it. Now, if it's all right, I'd like to move on to the second question. I don't think we'll have the time to finish everything, to go through the questions. We'll probably take this up in the next drop-in session on Monday. But let's just go to the second one. And this was alluded to earlier, and I'm sorry, I'm very bad with names. Why is it important to understand the idea of a constitution as a living document or as representing a system of government? And before if somebody would care to answer this question, if you could kindly explain to us what are the three senses by which we can understand what a constitution is, if that's all right. Otherwise, just feel free to answer the second question straight away. Anyone would like to give a go?
I'll have a go, Manjo.
Yes,
so reading through the textbook, they sort of talk about that the Constitution has no intrinsic capacity to maintain itself. So it's on, the government and the people sort of looking up to the government or as representative of them to maintain its integrity, basically. And of course, that's going to happen sort of with the society of the time. So it's not going to be sort of set in stone. It's going to be interpreted according to, I suppose, if you like, the political climate and economical climate and things like that.
Very good, thanks. Anyone else would like to answer this question?
So, Manuel, when you're talking about the three segments of constitution, are you talking about the written, the constitutional government, and then constitutionalism as a philosophical
Yes.
philosophical sense? Wow, I'm doing well.
Yes, go ahead.
So the idea of the Constitution as a living document, important. Sorry, I'm just trying to. I guess as a living document, meaning that it is. Well, this is my take, that it is still subject to change with the times, should that become necessary. But the same with representing system of government, it still has to be like it using that philosophical sense of constitutionalism. They still need to respect that living document as well. So while it needs to grow with the people, the government still needs to respect the essence of it, I guess, and not change it without absolute due cause to do so.
Yes. So three of you, Tamara and Angelina, and I'm looking here at the answer of Sharon, have actually talked of the Constitution as a living document in the sense that it is not set in stone. It is something that changes and evolves through time. Because, you know, if you talk about the Constitution as a living document, it represents the system of government as it is today, and things can change as society changes, as culture changes. So that's one. So which is why what will often happen is that when the High Court or any judge tries to interpret the Constitution, the question is, should the Constitution as written be interpreted according to the way that it was thought of and constructed by the framers of the Constitution in 1900 and understood by the people living then? Or should the Constitution as a text be interpreted in light of the needs of society today? Right? So it can go back, if you look at the question, for example, about, you know, questions about abortion, questions about same-sex marriages, those types of things, or questions about, in the United States, it could be the right to bear arms. But the way that these concepts were understood centuries ago is actually different from the way it is understood today. And the question for the judges and the justices would be, should they interpret the Constitution in light of how it was understood centuries ago? But in that case, if you treat the Constitution as a rigid written document, then it means you disallow yourself the opportunity to use the written Constitution as a way of providing opportunities for change today that are responsive to the needs of the people today. And it is in that sense that there is an argument that is made that the Constitution should be treated as a living document, that it is not fossilized, it is not set in stone, that it becomes responsive to the needs of today. So that's one aspect of the living document. The other aspect is, if you talk of a living Constitution, it actually means that it represents also a system of government. So when you speak of a system of government, you can understand it in terms of the three branches of government. And in fact, if you look at the Constitution, it's almost typical that the powers of the three branches of government are set there in the written Constitution. But in fact, perhaps as Faraz alluded to in Fiji, it is possible that what is in the written Constitution does not actually represent the reality of what goes on in society. So in other words, the written Constitution might say that no power should be concentrated in a single individual. But in truth, if you examine the institutions in a society at a particular point in time, it is totally different from what exists. So the argument of Ratapala and Crow is that if you want to examine a system of government, don't just look at the Constitution, because it may provide you, wrong things. Look at what actually exists in society today, so that it suggests to you how the society has actually been constituted, and the powers of government have actually been divided. Okay. It's almost 8 o'clock, and some of you are, oh yeah, I think that's right. So some have got classes at 7. So I think we've covered the first 2 questions. That should be enough for tonight. And I need, because people are beginning to drop out now. As far as discussion questions 3 and 4, which are in Moodle, I will provide the answers perhaps on tomorrow. I'll open the answers, or otherwise during the drop-in session on Monday, I will cover these 2 questions. Okay.
Manja, can I just ask before you leave? I noticed up on your slide you had something about we had to answer questions from the quizzes. I presume that's for the tutorial questions you're putting up in Moodle. Do we need to answer all of those to get that 10%? Or
no,
are you...
Actually, the online quizzes are different from the Moodle discussion questions. So there are no points for the Moodle for answering the Moodle discussion questions. Those are not the quizzes. The quizzes are separate from those Moodle discussion questions. So on Monday, I will post in Moodle the one question which is representative of the first online quiz. So there's just going to be one multiple choice question that will come out on Monday and every week thereafter. So the online quiz is totally distinct from the discussion questions, although it's possible that some of the questions that will be covered in the online quizzes will be kind of similar to that already taken up in the discussion question.
So is it the fact that I've noticed there are no multiple choice questions at the end of each week in the study notes? Is this how you're going to replace that?
So I'll come up with a different set of multiple choice questions, and those will be the ones which will be automatically graded and will comprise part of your grades, of your final grade.
Is it time limited for each of those?
No. You're given actually seven calendar days to answer the online quiz. Okay. But you can only answer it once within the 7-day period. Okay, so we need to go at 7 o'clock. Thank you everyone for joining tonight's session. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me by sending me an email or doing it in Moodle. And I look forward to seeing you again next week or on Monday. Good night. Bye.
Thanks for that, Manjo.
Thank you. Good night.